My name is Alexandra Chen, but everyone calls me Alex. For 3 years, I've worked as a receptionist at Elite Motors, Miami's most prestigious Ferrari dealership. But what my boss, Richard Sterling, never knew was that I was far more than just the woman who answered his phones. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived early at 7:30 a.m., the Miami sun already blazing against the gleaming rows of Ferraris worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. The dealership was a stunning piece of architecture, all glassed and sweeping curves, designed to showcase the multimillion-dollar inventory inside. I remember straightening my simple black blazer before unlocking the front doors, the familiar scent of leather and new car interiors greeting me. "Morning, Alex," called out Marco, our head mechanic, as he wheeled a Ferrari F8 Tributo into the service bay. "Any chance of getting those overtime forms processed today? The guys are asking about last month's holiday weekend." I grimaced, thinking of the stack of overtime requests sitting in Richard's inbox. "I'll try again at the morning meeting," I promised. The service team had worked through Memorial Day weekend to handle a special event, but Richard had been too busy to approve their extra pay for 3 weeks straight. What no one at Elite Motors knew, not Richard, not the sales team with their matching Rolexes, not even kind-hearted Marco, was that I had a very personal interest in seeing the dealership run properly. The truth was carefully hidden in layers of holding companies and real estate trusts. I owned the land the dealership sat on, all 5 acres of prime Miami commercial property. It had been my grandfather's last gift to me before he passed away 3 years ago. "Property is power, little one," he told me from his hospital bed, his voice weak but his eyes sharp as ever. "But knowledge, knowing when to reveal your power, that's everything." So I followed his advice. I took the receptionist position at Elite Motors to learn the business from the ground up, watching and waiting. I had an MBA from Wharton and enough family money to never work again. But grandfather had taught me the value of understanding every level of a business. And what I'd learned about Richard Sterling over 3 years made my blood boil. The morning meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp in the dealership's glass-walled conference room. Richard swept in last, as usual, his custom Tom Ford suit perfectly pressed. "Let's make this quick," he announced, not bothering to sit down. "Sales numbers for last month were decent, but I know we can do better. Jenkins, your team needs to push the F8s harder. We got too many sitting on the lot." I cleared my throat softly. "Mr. Sterling, about the service team's overtime forms." "Not now, Alex," he cut me off without even looking my way. "Sir, they've been waiting 3 weeks, and legally." Richard turned then, his face twisting into that familiar smirk that made my hand tighten on my notebook. "Look, if you're so concerned about a few hours of overtime, maybe you should find a job more suited to your capabilities. Answering phones can't be that demanding." The conference room went silent. I could feel Marco tensing behind me, could see Jenkins and the other salespeople suddenly finding their phones fascinating. "After all," Richard continued, clearly enjoying his audience, "it's not like you contribute anything meaningful here. You're just a receptionist. Frankly, a worthless one at that, since you can't seem to understand when to keep quiet." I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. 3 years of watching Richard bully employees, dodge regulations, and cut corners had led to this moment. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. "Knowledge is knowing when to reveal your power." "You're absolutely right, Mr. Sterling," I said quietly, reaching into my bag. "I am just a receptionist. But there's something you should see." I pulled out a thick manila envelope and removed several documents, sliding them across the polished conference table. "This is the deed to the land Elite Motors sits on. And these are the property tax records for the past 3 years. Richard glanced at the papers dismissively. "What's your point?" "The dealership has a long-term lease with some investment group. Chen Holdings or something. Chen Real Estate Trust, actually." I corrected him. "Founded by my grandfather 30 years ago. I inherited it when he passed away 3 years ago, right before I started working here." The color began draining from Richard's face as the implications sank in. I continued, my voice steady. "I also have here a complete record of every regulatory violation you've committed since taking over as owner. Every falsified emissions test, every illegal markup, every instance of overtime denial." I placed another stack of papers on the table. "The Ferrari corporate office might be interested in these. They take their brand reputation very seriously." Richard's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger. You're bluffing. You can't. I can. I cut him off. And I will. You see, the lease agreement has some very specific clauses about regulatory compliance and ethical business practices. Clauses you violated repeatedly. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. You have until Monday morning to resign as owner and transfer your controlling shares to the employee trust I've set up. If you don't, I'll terminate the lease, notify Ferrari Corporate, and contact the Department of Labor about those overtime violations. I'm sure the Miami Herald would love the story too. The conference room erupted in chaos as I walked out. Marco caught up with me at my desk. 3 years, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. You worked the front desk for 3 years, dealing with his abuse when you owned the whole damn property. I smiled, thinking of my grandfather. I needed to understand the business from every angle, needed to know its true value, its people. I gestured to the overtime forms on my desk. Speaking of which, let's get these processed. I think you'll find the new ownership much more prompt with payroll. Richard stormed out of the dealership an hour later, his face purple with rage. He tried to take the Ferrari he'd been using as his personal vehicle, but I'd already had Marco change the keys. The car belongs to the dealership, I called out as he stood fuming in the parking lot. But don't worry, I called you an Uber. After all, we wouldn't want to be worthless hosts. As his Uber pulled away, I sat down at my reception desk one last time and began composing an email to Ferrari's corporate office. By Monday morning, Elite Motors would have new ownership, new management, and a very different way of doing business. But first, I had some overtime forms to process. The weekend after my confrontation with Richard was anything but quiet. By Friday evening, my phone was already buzzing with calls from Ferrari's corporate office in Italy. I sat in what had been Richard's office, now mine, speaking in fluent Italian to their executives, explaining the situation and my plans for Elite Motors. Ms. Chen, the Ferrari VP of North American Operations, said, switching to English, we've been concerned about Sterling's management for some time, but had no concrete evidence. You say you have documentation? Complete records, I confirmed, looking at the files I'd meticulously gathered over 3 years, including evidence of unauthorized markups on limited edition models, falsified service records, and customer complaints that were buried. There was a pause on the line. And you've worked as the receptionist? I smiled, remembering my grandfather's words about learning a business from the ground up. The best way to understand a company's true operations is from the front desk, sir. You see everything, hear everything, and most importantly, if you're patient, you can document everything. The VP chuckled. Your grandfather taught you well. Chen Holdings has been a respected name in Asian business circles for decades. We would be very interested in maintaining our relationship with Elite Motors under your leadership. By Sunday night, everything was in motion. Richard, faced with the choice between a graceful exit or legal destruction, had signed over his controlling shares to the employee trust I'd established. His last act was a desperate email to the staff, trying to paint himself as a victim of corporate espionage. I forwarded it to our lawyers without comment. Monday morning, I arrived early as usual, but not to sit at the reception desk. Instead, I gathered the entire staff in the showroom before opening. 60 pairs of eyes watched me as I stood in front of our flagship Ferrari SF90 Stradale. Many of you have questions, I began, about what happened Friday and what happens next. Let me be clear. Elite Motors isn't just changing ownership, we're changing how we do business entirely. I gestured to Marco, our head mechanic. First, all outstanding overtime has been processed. The checks will be in your accounts by noon. A cheer went up from the service team. Additionally, we're implementing a new profit-sharing program. Every employee, from sales to service to support staff, will now have equity in the dealership's success. Jenkins, our top salesman, raised his hand. Ms. Chen, Alex, what about our sales targets? The pressure under Mr. Sterling was unsustainable and unethical. I finished. We're moving to a customer-focused model. No more pushing cars on people who can't afford them. No more hidden fees or markups. Ferrari chose us to represent their brand because of excellence, not exploitation. I could see the tension leaving people's shoulders, replaced by cautious hope. But make no mistake, I continued, I expect excellence from every person in this room. We will be the most prestigious, most ethical, and most successful Ferrari dealership in North America. Not by cutting corners, but by doing things right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. I brought in a consulting team to modernize our systems, implemented a new customer service protocol, and personally reviewed every active sale to ensure it met our new ethical standards. Some customers were surprised to receive refund checks for unauthorized markups, along with VIP invitations to our upcoming client appreciation event. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. 2 salespeople, unable to adapt to our new ethical standards, quit. A few of Richard's old friends in the luxury car world tried to spread rumors about us. But the results spoke for themselves. By the end of the first month, our customer satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. Our service department's efficiency improved by 40% now that they had proper staffing and resources. Sales actually increased. It turned out that treating customers with respect and transparency led to more referrals and repeat business. 6 weeks after the takeover, I was working late in my office when Marco knocked on the door. "About a minute, boss?" he asked, holding a folder. "Always," I said, gesturing to a chair. "And please, it's still Alex." He sat down, shaking his head with a smile. "Still can't believe you spent 3 years answering phones and filing paperwork when you owned the whole place." "Best education I could have gotten," I replied. "I learned who the real heroes were, like a certain service team that stayed late every weekend to make sure customers' cars were perfect, even when they weren't getting paid overtime." Marco laughed. "About that, I wanted to show you something." He opened the folder, revealing service records. "Remember the SF90 that Richard could never figure out? The one with the intermittent electrical issue?" I nodded. It had been a source of constant customer complaints. "Well, with the new diagnostic equipment you approved and proper time to test it," he handed me the solution, neatly documented. "Fixed. Permanently." "Excellent work," I said, genuinely impressed. "Make sure the customer gets a detailed report and comp their next service as an apology for the wait." Marco stood to leave, then paused. "You know, the guys in service were talking. Richard used to say we were worthless grease monkeys. Called you worthless too. Funny how the worthless people turned out to be the ones who actually knew how to run this place right." After you left, I walked out to the showroom. The evening sun painted the Ferraris in shades of gold and crimson, their sleek lines reflecting the Miami sunset. On my grandfather's desk, now in my office, sat a framed photo of him standing in front of his first real estate acquisition. He was wearing overalls, having spent the day working alongside his maintenance crew. "Property is power," he'd always said. "But knowledge, knowing when to reveal your power, that's everything." I'd added my own lesson to his wisdom. True power isn't in humiliating others or proving your superiority. It's in building something meaningful, something that lifts everyone up. Elite Motors under Richard had been a monument to one man's ego. Now it was becoming something far more valuable. A business where excellence and ethics went hand in hand. Richard's worthless receptionist had turned out to be the owner he never saw coming. But more importantly, she turned his dealership into the success he could never achieve by valuing the very people he'd dismissed. The next morning, a familiar face appeared in the showroom. Richard's former assistant Lisa, who'd quit months ago after one too many verbal abuse incidents. "I heard things have changed," she said hesitantly. "That it's different now." I smiled, remembering how she'd always been kind to me when I was just the receptionist. "Very different. In fact, we're looking for a new customer relations manager, someone who knows our clients and understands the importance of treating people with respect." Her eyes widened. "Really? But I don't have a fancy degree or—" "You have something better," I cut in. "Experience, integrity, and first-hand knowledge of how not to treat people. When can you start?" As I showed her around her new office, I caught our reflection in the window. 2 women Richard had called worthless, now helping to run one of the most successful Ferrari dealerships in the country. The irony would have been sweet enough on its own. But the real victory wasn't in proving him wrong. The real victory was in proving ourselves right. 3 months after the takeover, Ferrari's corporate office sent a team to evaluate our operations. They spent a week reviewing every aspect of the business, from sales to service to customer satisfaction. Their final report was glowing, with one particular comment that made me smile. Elite Motors represents the perfect fusion of excellence and ethics. Ms. Chen's innovative approach, combining deep operational knowledge with a commitment to employee empowerment and customer satisfaction, sets a new standard for luxury automotive retail. I had the report framed and hung in the break room, right next to our new mission statement. Excellence is not what we do, it's who we are. Richard's name faded from Miami's luxury car scene, but Elite Motors thrived. Our employee trust grew in value month after month, creating wealth not just for the salespeople but for every person who contributed to our success. The once worthless receptionist had turned a toxic workplace into a model of ethical business practice. Sometimes, on quiet evenings after the showroom closes, I still sit at the front desk for a few minutes. It reminds me of those 3 years of watching, learning, and planning. But mostly it reminds me that true worth isn't in titles or power. It's in what you build, how you treat people, and the legacy you create. As for that overtime paperwork that sparked the final confrontation, it's now processed automatically every Friday with bonuses for exceptional service. After all, in a business built on excellence, no contribution is ever worthless. The story of Elite Motors spread through the luxury car world, a cautionary tale about underestimating people and the power of patient, principled leadership. Richard still sometimes drives past the dealership in his leased BMW, seeing his former empire now shining brighter than ever. But he doesn't stop in anymore. After all, his Uber rating isn't quite up to our standards.